Hello and welcome to On Your Screen, a relatively new monthly show about digital film culture. I'm your host, Will DeGravio, and on today's show, I sit down with Don McGowell, the creator of the popular Twitter account Silent Movie GIFs. We discuss the history of the account, Don's curatorial approach, why the GIF is an ideal medium for the sharing of silent film, how content spreads on the internet, and how GIFs are helping to bring silent cinema to new audiences in the 21st century. Don also talks about his Reddit page and the viral compilation videos he has made about silent cinema on YouTube. For those who may be new to this podcast, this show is a companion to another podcast that I host called the Video Essay Podcast, which is a show featuring conversations with leading critics, scholars, filmmakers, and other practitioners of videographic criticism or video essays. To learn more about On Your Screen, the Video Essay Podcast, and the other work that I do, please visit www.thevideoessay.com or follow us on Twitter @thevideoessay. And now, here is my conversation with Don McGowell, the creator of Silent Movie GIFs. Now I'm very pleased to be joined by Don McGowell. If you do not know Don by his name, you will undoubtedly be familiar or perhaps even follow, but at the very least encountered Don's very popular Twitter account, Silent Movie GIFs, which has over, I believe, 130,000 followers on Twitter and is kind of I think of it as a staple of what we might call film Twitter or just online movie culture fandom in general. And so, Don, thank you so much for agreeing to be here and welcome to On Your Screen. So happy to have you.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
And so I imagine it must be interesting to have such a prolific and well-known movie account or just Twitter account in general that isn't tied directly to your name, because people know that entity, but they might not know who you are. And so would you mind just giving us a brief introduction of who you are, your background, and how that led to you starting this Twitter account?
Yeah, well, I mean, I live in Toronto, in Canada, and I work in the newspaper industry, I guess, for a newspaper here in Toronto. And I'm not sure, how that exactly ties into my Twitter account. I guess it's, I guess there's some overlap in terms of the skill, because it's like a lot of my job is about writing headlines, like, good SEO headlines, good print headlines. And I guess that's sort of like a tweet is sort of a headline in its own way, just efficiently communicating an idea in as few words as possible. So as to how I started the account, I guess I noticed just online the popularity of GIFs made from silent movies, and I was sort of struck by how like the content fit the form. Like how we have this popular medium now online that's just like entirely visual, just like about images with no sound. And of course, silent movies 100 years ago, basically the same thing. So how it sort of just very easily can be slotted into a GIF. Because people make GIFs out of anything. Like I've seen people they take like a Bernie Sanders speech and make a GIF out of it, which seems like not an ideal medium, but I guess it's just because the GIF is a very accessible format. If you want something to spread online, it's a very, I guess, low bar to have that happen. So I was just kind of struck by that, just how well, a Buster Keaton joke from like 100 years ago, just how well it translates into a GIF that people could, share online today.
Right. And as you say, it is interesting because the GIF, of course, doesn't have any sound. So it's kind of perfect. And what's interesting is that so few pieces of media these days don't have sound, right? Like I feel like we live in such a culture dominated by speed and sound and boom and loud and, walking around listening to music all the time. Like I'm talking to you now with my AirPods, right? And so much of what we do is dominated by sound, but yet the GIF remains this dominant part of the culture, but it takes away that bareness of it and really allows as you say, the medium to shine. So when you started the account, did you set out to build like this big thing, or was it just because you were passionate about sharing it? Like, how did you think about the account when you first started it? Like, what was your goal?
Well, I guess initially I started posting, the first GIFs I posted were on Reddit, because I actually saw on Reddit, I don't know if you're familiar with the Buster Keaton movie. Well, it's actually a Roscoe Arbuckle movie that Buster Keaton is in, but the Bellboy from 1918 is a famous this gag where Buster Keaton is cleaning like a piece of glass, and you're sort of watching him, and eventually you realize that it's not a piece of glass there because he leans through. It's a visual gag. It's a brilliant kind of visual gag. And I just saw a version of that that was very, it had probably like 1 million views or something on Reddit, but it was a very like low quality GIF. Like it looked like the source material was like a VHS tape or something that someone had uploaded to YouTube in like 240 DPI, and it was just like, even though it was like such a low quality image, it was still resonating with people. So my process, I thought, was just, I have that movie on Blu-ray and I have like Photoshop on my computer. I could probably make a better looking version of that, and maybe people would share that instead, and it would sort of, because people sort of think sometimes they see a low quality piece from a movie and they think, okay, that's just how movies were. Like people in like 1918 were just going to the theater and the image on the screen was just like a blurry mess. Like that's just how, they didn't understand focus or anything. So, I thought like I could make a cleaner, better looking version of that GIF. And that's sort of, how I sort of started out. I mean, I didn't actually know anything about making GIFs. So initially it was a bit of a learning curve, but I just figured I had the elements that I needed. Because I guess a lot of the internet is sort of a self-contained system. Like when people want to make something on the internet, they sort of look for content to make. They look for the content they're using to make it on the internet as well. So they'll go to like another YouTube video and they'll just like take a clip from that, or like they'll just, it's a contained system. Yeah. So I guess I just sort of started out making GIFs that way. And some of them got like a lot of, I made a few GIFs and so some of them got pretty popular and they got like, hundreds of thousands of views. And I sort of thought like, this is interesting. I mean, even though silent movies are kind of a very niche thing, they still have this they can sort of resonate with an audience today. They can still find like sort of a mass audience. So I just sort of thought like, what if I made a Twitter account? And I guess in retrospect, like Twitter is not a very good medium for a GIF account, especially like in 2015, when I started the account, like you could only make 5 megabyte GIFs, which is sort of, it's not really ideal. Because I find you can get sort of roughly, you can get like a second of film to like 1 megabyte in sort of decent quality. I mean, I've done like more, like I think I've done like GIFs that are almost a minute long, but there's a lot of, you've got to trade off a lot of things in terms of frame rate, in terms of the colors, in terms of like the resolution. But like to get like optimal quality, you can do like 15 megabytes, which is what it is now, will give you like, 10, 15 seconds, which is sort of perfect for a lot of silent movie gags. But 5 seconds, you could do a lot less with that.
And there was a time early on with GIFs where it wasn't necessarily as easy to, and sometimes it still isn't, to embed them within certain media. Sometimes a GIF had to be tied like to a certain link. Am I correct in remembering that? And like there weren't like built-in GIF keyboards and phones. Like it was before there was so well integrated into the media. It sounds like you were doing it, in kind of the earlier days of the form, as you say.
Well, I mean, I think GIFs were pretty big then, and I guess but yeah, definitely, because the GIF has been around since like it's actually was invented in 1987, so it's a very old format as far as the internet goes. And I remember but initially internet GIFs were just like dancing hamsters or whatever. Like they're very simple. Like they were on the internet, but they didn't really become a big part of the internet until I think the 2010s. I think part of that has to do with there was a legal dispute with the inventor of the format. And I guess that guy also, I should mention, he always pronounces it GIF, which I can't really wrap my head around. But I mean, I appreciate that's his image format. So if he wants to call it GIF, but like, yeah, so I think it kind of the GIF boom has kind of taken off like over the last decade, and I guess like on Tumblr, but I guess the irony is like people, even though we talk about GIFs, there's very few actual literal GIFs on the internet because the GIF is it's like an inefficient format. Like when you put a GIF on Twitter or on any platform, it converts it into some kind of proprietary video file, which is like a much smaller data footprint because obviously people don't want to be downloading a 15 megabyte file on their phone plan. So any GIF you see is actually, they call them GIFs, but they're actually, I guess that's part of what's made the GIF popular is like we've created more efficient ways of displaying short looping animations, but the name is stuck.
Wow, that's fascinating. I hadn't realized that. I hadn't thought through so much of this, and I want to circle back to that later in the conversation. But first, I want to have another question about you because I love this. You creating this Buster Keaton GIF because you wanted people to understand something about film and about film history, and to also allow people to experience Buster Keaton, who of course is a genius and one of the greatest directors and performers in film history, and you want them to really experience it and be able to see it. So were silent movies something that you were always passionate about and always interested in? Are you interested in just film history in general? Where did you, because when one sees your account now, it's clear you have a tremendous knowledge and passion for silent film. Was that always there, or did that develop with the growth of the Twitter account?
Well, I mean, I guess I've always been kind of a movie fan. I mean, I guess the silent movies in particular, I guess, have kind of, I guess I sort of found a niche in terms of the account, because I guess it's sort of, if it was just like GIFs made from movies, that's not really a hook. So it's like silent movies, GIFs. It's like a simple concept. So I kind of focused on that. But I mean, I do like movies of all kinds, across the eras. I mean, and sometimes I do try to tie in things. Like, I mean, I guess obviously after like 5 years of making GIFs from silent movies, I mean, obviously there's a lot of silent movies, but I mean, it's always interesting to sort of, if I can take something else like Star Wars, or I don't know, like I guess last week I watched a movie like My Man Godfrey, and I was sort of thinking about a lot of the people in that movie were either silent movie stars or they were in silent movies. And I kind of just like, then I sort of thought about, like there's a lot of like 1930s stars who started out as like bit players in the silent movies. Or I did like, I mean, it wasn't a very popular piece of content, but just something I found interesting was just like the movie Stella Dallas. And like I sort of, like I'm always interested in movies where there's like a sound version and a silent version, and just comparing the two, just sort of seeing how the art form of film had evolved, how they sort of telling the same story, but with the addition of sound. So, I mean, just sort of comparing scene by scene, which, I mean, I guess that's sort of, I mean, Stella Dallas, I mean, obviously that's not like a big, blockbuster GIF, but it was just something that I found interesting.
And, going back to why you chose GIFs over, because, I've, on your Twitter account, you're talking about the different forms of content that you do. And I've seen you do, comparison GIFs of, how maybe one silent film influenced a more contemporary film, or threads about certain performers. And you also sometimes will do short little videos. When you were starting the account and thinking through what you wanted to do, what drew you to the form of GIF over perhaps, maybe doing short videos or something? Like, did you ever consider doing that, or was it just always the GIF?
I guess I've always just been struck by, as I said, like how the GIF sort of fits the medium, or how it fits the content. And I guess it's sort of weird. Like sometimes I'll go to a lot of effort to sort of take like a 45-second clip of some Buster Keaton gag that's too long, that's almost really too long to make into a GIF, and just like working on it in Photoshop and just like squeezing it down to make it fit in that 15 megabytes, when I could just take that clip and just post that on Twitter. But I feel like almost like my whole account, like the whole point is I'm making them into GIFs. Like, I mean, even though like what's a GIF versus a video? I mean, a GIF is just another video format essentially, but I don't know. I sort of like the constraint of having to, but I mean, I have been sort of branching out into video just because, I mean, I guess obviously there's only so much you can do with a GIF where it's like 10 seconds long. So I sort of, I mean, I guess, I've been doing this for like 5 years. I don't want to just keep doing the exact same thing over and over. So I've been trying to sort of find new outlets to, and I guess also I found like the videos have been some of my more popular content. So I guess, because you can sort of put, I guess a lot of my theory of making a popular piece of content is just taking a lot of things that are sort of interesting, like I made a video of just crazy train stunts, and you can just make a GIF of one of those and it might do okay. Like it's like, look at this crazy train going off a bridge, but you just take like 20 of them and just put them back to back to back and just sort of build this whole thing out of it, and it sort of compounds. So I found like video offers things that, a GIF doesn't do. I mean, at one point I was just doing like series of GIFs, or I post them on I also have a subreddit I created where I post these GIFs, because I think Reddit's actually probably a better medium in terms of if you want to have GIFs and get them seen by a lot of people. Reddit is like a much more efficient mechanism for that than Twitter. Because, I mean, Reddit can get like...
Right. Why is that?
Well, it's just, I don't know. I mean, Twitter is not, as I said, like, I mean, if I thinking back on it now, I mean, Twitter is not really an ideal platform for GIFs. I mean, even like when you have like 100,000 followers, you might think like, oh, if I have 100,000 followers on Twitter and I post a GIF of something, like 100,000 people will see it. But I mean, it's like the way the Twitter algorithm works, and like you get like maybe 5% of your followers see any given thing you post. So to get like 1 million views on a GIF on Twitter is like very... Even when you have 100,000 followers, like I've managed to build up, to get like 1 million views is like very difficult. But like you could just be any random person. You could just go and just like create a Reddit account tomorrow and just like post something, and it could just sort of randomly, it could go nowhere, or it could just like blow up and get 1 million, 5 million, whatever, views. It's just, but then it's all, you don't have the whole, it's kind of, I guess, an anonymous sort of platform where people are just posting content just for the sake of posting it. And I guess also when I created the subreddit, I found this, it's a place where people can discuss silent film. It's like a very sort of democratic space. because there are like silent movie subreddits, which people do post interesting stuff there and they talk about silent film, but those are fairly small. Whereas my subreddit, I guess, is close. It's around like 50,000 people. So it's, it's like it's sort of a niche GIF subreddit. Like there's a lot of different, like there's some big GIF subreddits. Like I think baby elephant GIFs is really big. People love baby elephants. But it's just like, there's like weather GIFs, like any kind of GIF has its own subreddit. So I sort of thought like, I can make this subreddit and people could discuss the GIFs. And also the thing with Reddit is people can come there and they can see, oh, that's an interesting GIF. Let me just share it to this subreddit with like 10 million people. And then, so it's easier for people to take something and to sort of share it out into a broader internet versus Twitter, where I guess you can retweet it, but that's, I don't know. So yeah, Twitter is not, I suggest, it's not an optimal platform actually for GIFs.
That makes a lot of sense. Seems like Reddit is perhaps more, there's more curated lists that then have the potential to kind of spread throughout. Whereas Twitter, the curation is kind of whoever you choose to follow, right? But do you find that there are people who, I would imagine there must be people who just follow your account or engage with your content who perhaps that's the only way that they have been exposed to silent film. Like they've never seen a full silent film, or maybe they've only seen a couple, and your account serves this kind of educational purpose. Is that something you think about or something that you find or have heard from your account?
Yeah, I do think now that Twitter or like the internet and like especially GIFs, are probably a medium through which a lot of people would discover silent film. Like I guess, because they talk about how in the 1950s to the 1960s, there was kind of a new appreciation was found by people through seeing silent films on television, even if they were like sort of cut down and like they added goofy sound effects or whatever. Or like Buster Keaton sort of found a new audience in the 60s and the 50s by going on a bunch of like, he had his own TV show. He was going on like late night shows. He was doing beer commercials.
Wasn't he in like Beach Blanket Bingo and those movies?
Yeah, doing cameos in movies. So that's sort of, I think sort of like a new generation of fans kind of discovered him through those mediums. But now I think the odds are the first place someone's going to see Buster Keaton or like Harold Lloyd, or, they're going to see that scene from Wings where the camera goes through that cafe in Paris, or like Metropolis, any of these sort of silent movie things is probably like on the internet, and probably a GIF. Because I said like a GIF is a very, it's very, I guess, democratic. Like it's very easy to share. Like it's not a big commitment of time. Even just like watching a silent movie on YouTube is still like maybe daunting. Like it's like it's like sort of a different medium. Like if you're not used to watching a silent movie, and plus again the quality might not be the best, but just watching like a 10-second GIF, at least it sort of I figure people could sort of build some awareness. So then maybe they might at least sort of be intrigued by the concept, and they might see like, oh, Buster Keaton, and they have some association with that name. Because that's one thing I find too, is like sometimes I'll post a Buster Keaton GIF, and then people will reply with their own Buster Keaton GIFs. Like people sort of, they recognize who he is, and sort of they know, and then they have associations already of like, okay, that's the guy who did the falling wall and the thing with the train and all these other things. Like this sort of, it means something to people.
And one thing I would imagine too is, even though, obviously these films don't have sound, sometimes it maybe is, and Twitter has the function where like a video, if you're watching it, might start to automatically play, but a GIF to look at it and engage with it is pretty low stakes and pretty low. Like you don't need to like click on the video and watch it and wonder whether it has sound. Like you can be on the subway scrolling through, or you can be, in a classroom or at your day job, just kind of scrolling through without any sound, and you can engage with the GIF and get something from it. And in talking about, I thought it was really fascinating the way you talked about how the GIF forced you to really focus and to have that constraint and to look for something that really had a punch and an impact. And I think so many of the GIFs that I enjoy of yours are, when they show Buster Keaton or Chaplin or, Fritz Lang or whoever doing something really innovative with the camera, right? Or they're having their own style, and they show that, and I could imagine someone engaging with that GIF for the first time, even for the fleeting second, just saying, wow, there's a lot more. These aren't just boring old black and white movies. They're doing really exciting, innovative things.
Yeah, like I think that's one of the most popular silent movie GIFs has got to be, as I mentioned, that shot from Wings of the camera sort of tracking through all these people sitting at tables until it arrives at Buddy Rogers sitting there with his drink in his Paris nightclub. And I think it's partially the power of that is because it sort of surprises people. Like they have an expectation of what a movie from 1927 should look like where there's like very static cameras and like very basic, and they're sort of just like surprised, like, wow, look at this. This is like this amazing shot. So, that's a very, I think I did a GIF too, like where it's like that the Star Wars movie where there's a reference that like Ryan Johnson makes to that shot in the casino on. So I made a GIF of that, sort of like a side-by-side comparison of the two. But, that's a very, that's sort of one of your classic, like your top 10 silent movie GIFs. There's some that are just like guaranteed, it's just an amazing shot. And just, people just aren't expecting that. So it kind of just maybe opens up their eyes to like the fact that, that there was really interesting cinematography being done almost 100 years ago. It wasn't just because people maybe sort of people sort of maybe have a compressed notion of what silent cinema was like. Like they think like The Great Train Robbery or something, where it's just all these static shots of like, people just, just long takes and like they don't like how much cinema evolved over the course of those few decades of the silent era. It wasn't all just like these, because it makes initially it was almost like they were just filming a stage play. Like just you have actors and they're just standing there at a medium shot, just doing their thing, and you just keep that shot for like a long time. There's not a lot of cutting, not a lot of camera movement, but towards the end of the silent era, there was really like a golden era for that kind of thing. And I sort of I love a good tracking shot if I could find, and sometimes it's hard to fit them into 15 megabytes, or it sounds like quite long. Like there's a really amazing one in Sunrise where it's sort of tracking through the swamp, and they actually built they had a set with like two different moons, so it's intentionally disorienting where you see the moon at one point and then the camera's moving around and there's like another moon, and it eventually arrives at this woman who's standing there by the lake, and that's it's like a really amazing shot, though it's kind of too long to fit into a GIF.
And so this continues perfectly to my next question, which is how do you select the films that you feature? I'd be interested just to kind of know your planning process. Do you plan out your tweets days, months, weeks in advance? What is your general philosophy? Because you are really a curator of this material, and I'm sure a lot of thought goes into it. You say, like the shot from Wings, of course, that might be one that can gain a lot of traction, but I'm sure you also must think about, underseen films or moments or GIFs that you want to try and highlight. So what is your philosophy when it comes to curation?
Yeah, like it is kind of a balancing act, because I guess that's one of the sort of the opportunities and sort of the challenges of social media is that there's so much, you have access to so much data and analytics, so you can really see, like I really know what my audience likes. Like I know they like Buster Keaton, Charlie Chaplin, they like German expressionist movies, they like things about like really interesting special effects things, like from, matte shots and things, or like there's a certain, like 1920s glamour, like Clara Bow, like there's certain things they like, and there's certain things I know won't do that well, but it's still, so the challenge, I guess, is kind of balancing that. Like, I mean, I want to give, obviously you want to give people what they want, but they're also not just becoming entirely that and sort of mixing in some new things. And like sometimes, like I know, like things aren't necessarily going to do that great. Like I watched the movie Quality Street, and it's like an interesting movie, but like it's not really. It's sort of hard to make like a GIF from that really kind of is going to do that. Oh, actually, the biggest one, I guess, is the movie Tollable David. I think I pronounced that right. Tollable. I don't know. With it's a very like it was a huge. I think it was like one of the biggest movies of like 1921. And like you see all these people, like John Ford said it's one of his favorite movies. Mary Pickford loved the movie. Harold Lloyd made a movie that was kind of like a tribute to it. So it's like this big movie. But I've never been able to make a GIF from that movie and it kind of captures that appeal. Like whatever appeal it had in 1921 does not translate into a GIF. Like the best I ever did was there's a shot where the villain kills the hero's dog, sort of like a John Wick kind of a thing, though that's not really the inciting incident. Like he doesn't seem to care that much, but they kill his dog, but you can sort of see in the movie at one point the dog, right before they cut, the dog looks up to see what's going on, which I thought was sort of funny. So, I mean, that's the best I've ever managed to do out of making a piece of content from that movie. Or like The Covered Wagon, which was like one of the biggest movies of all time. Like this, this sort of the first big, I guess, really blockbuster Western. It was like, the biggest movie of 1923. And like I saw like this thing from like Photoplay magazine where they asked all these people like, what's the best movie ever? And they all agreed that one of the best movies ever was The Covered Wagon. So it's, it's a huge thing at the time, but then it's sort of hard to really capture that in a GIF. So yeah, so I mean, I'd like to get back to the point, I guess, of what you were asking about is, yeah, I mean, there's kind of a balancing act like between movies that I know are going to do well versus things I just think are interesting, or a lot of it's just things that I'm watching. Like, I mean, I sort of have used this account as a reason to sort of watch more silent cinema. I mean, when I started it, I'd obviously watched some of it, but I mean, I've really dived a lot deeper into that. And I guess maybe one of the most satisfying things for me is sort of when I can take something that isn't inherently going to do that well. Like I really like, I'm a big Ozu fan, like just in general, but I really like, I've been watching a lot of his silent movies, and that's not something that's necessarily going to be a big, they don't have like huge GIF potential. Like they're beautiful movies, but they're not something like Metropolis or like Steamboat Bill Jr. or something, where you can just take like basically any random shot and just like put that in a GIF and it's just going to do well. Like it's sort of hard to translate that into that medium. But I made recently, like I made a collection of, because Ozu's had a whole thing where he put posters of movies he liked in the backgrounds of his silent movies. And this I found this by taking all those and sort of making like I think it's like a 23-second segment of just all these shots of movie posters. And that actually I think I got like 800 retweets. So that to actually, to sort of take something that I find interesting that isn't necessarily going to be, it's sort of more difficult to translate and actually have that sort of fine subtraction with people is sort of satisfying, because it's easy just to take, like, as I said, like, if I just start with like Metropolis, or I just make a bunch of clips from Buster Keaton movies or something, I just know from the start that that's probably going to do well because of the source material, and it's kind of a very easy thing, but just to sort of try to branch out more into beyond just those things. So I was pretty happy with that. Like it's just sort of beautiful, just like all the shots of all the movie posters, and sort of thinking about, like, I guess, these classic films that Ozu was influenced by, and just I don't know, I was happy with that,
Yeah, no, I missed that. So I'm gonna have to go. I'm right after we're doing this conversation. I can't wait to go watch that. And the other podcast that I do, the companion to this, is the Video Essay podcast, and is really interested in video essays and videographic criticism, we call it generally. And one format we talk about is the Supercut. And it seems like that video of yours sounds like a form of a supercut.
I mean, it's a very short supercut, but yeah, it is a supercut. I do enjoy a good supercut.
It sounds like almost like the equivalent of, capturing every time Hitchcock appears in his movies or something like that, the influences of Ozu. And so I'm wondering, before I get to my next question, I just, based on what you said, because I love this notion of how you think about the GIFs that you're making, and the struggle of trying to capture for lack of a better word, the essence of a film in a GIF. Why did Ford or Pickford love this film? Why does it have this status in something else? Was there an example of a time where you were really like trying to think through a GIF of a film, and then you kind of had an aha moment and were able to make a GIF? Or was there one moment where you found a GIF that captured something that you were really proud of and that really surprised you and how well it did?
Yeah, no, I mean, because I'm sure there have been things, like, as I said, like there are some things where it's just, I'm surprised, because I mean, I sort of have expectations of just how well certain things will do, and sometimes things do surprise me. I guess sometimes it's just because someone retweets something that it just, I mean, that's a big factor too, in terms of like how well something will do.
I love what you say about the Ozu, and again, it sounds to me kind of like a form of a supercutter, as you say, a small version of the supercut. And we've said this several times, but for those who may not be familiar with your account, you'll often, as you say, feature these great threads that have a mix that are on silent film or silent film stars, or the influences of silent film on the cinema that came after it, that sometimes have videos and GIFs or both. And you have this mix of analysis or criticism, and I think it's clear from when I'm talking to you, this deep knowledge and passion for film history. And I wonder whether you think of yourself as a historian, as a critic, both, neither, and how do you see the Twitter account? How does it function as a piece of criticism and really as an archive?
Well, I mean, I think that there are people who are doing sort of a much better job of what you're talking about in terms of criticism or film history. Like, I mean, movies silently, or like Silent London. I mean, accounts like that are sort of, I think, doing way beyond anything I'm doing in terms of exposing people to like the history of movies, or like, I mean, I think myself, as you say, like more of a curator. I just sort of find things I think are interesting, or shots I think are interesting, or a combination of an interesting shot and sort of an interesting piece of factoid about how it was made, and is posting those. So I'm sort of more just, I don't know, that's just sort of what I'm doing in my mind. It's sort of finding interesting things. So I sort of go down like a rabbit hole where I just find something and it sort of piques my curiosity. I sort of want to look into, learn more about it, Like I did a thing where I was kind of just like, I saw like that Harold Lloyd was reading a newspaper in the movie Speedy. I know he filmed that partially in New York, and he's reading the New York Times. So it's like, I wonder if I could find that specific issue of the New York Times that he's reading to see like what day that was. And it had, and I have my New York Times subscription gives you the access to their archives, which is just amazing. And they have like all 150 years or whatever of the Times. So I went back to the summer of 1928 and just like, I couldn't really read the headlines on the paper, but just, the sort of seeing the basic outline, like the layout of the front page. I found the paper he's reading, and this is sort of just seeing like what was actually in that paper. I mean, I think a lot of the stories were about there's like stories about like, it's sort of weird. It actually chose that paper because there's stories about like terrorist bombings in the subway and like in Baltimore. And I guess it was, it's a very fraught time, I guess, for America. Like it's kind of, I want to wonder like, if the audience could actually see, I mean, it's only like a 1 second shot, but if you notice, this is a shot about like bombing in subway. It's kind of a jarring thing. And then some of the stories in the paper, like, there was like an ad for like Wings was coming out next week. And there's like there's like a picture of the Queen as a baby. I don't know. It's sort of interesting to imagine like, that's sort of that moment in time and just like what was in that, kind of went down a rabbit hole there.
Wow. I love that you do that. That's so amazing. And talk about close film analysis and viewing. And I think one of the things I think is so great about what you're doing and about the GIF and that this isolation is like seeing things, giving us new ways to see things that maybe we've encountered over and over again. Like how many times people have seen that newspaper and not thought to go look at it, or seeing a shot in a different way. And so when you're watching a silent film, are you looking for GIFs as you're watching, or is it an organic process for you? Will you go back later? Like, can you enjoy a silent film without thinking about what would be the most GIFable shot here?
Yeah, I do sort of mentally catalog, like when I'm watching a movie, like I just sort of, I can't help but sort of think of like what parts are sort of the most striking imagery, especially like, in Toronto, we're lucky to have quite a few places that screen silent movies on like, big screens, like movie theaters. Well, I guess that's obviously been kind of affected by this whole pandemic, unfortunately, but there's been a few venues where they show silent movies on the big screen, and just go into a screening and just sort of, some things will sort of jump out at me. Like I just sort of see like, oh, that's an interesting shot. Or sometimes I do go back afterwards and kind of look through it, trying to find something. But yeah, usually when you watch a movie, you can sort of see like what's going to be an interesting, has potential. And there's some movies where basically like any frame almost, you can just go to any random point. Like Sherlock Jr. is maybe the most GIFable movie I think ever in terms of the whole silent era. You can just sort of pick almost any scene of that movie at random, and there'll be something that will work well as a GIF. Whereas other movies, like there could be like very little. It's a good movie, but it's sort of like if it's just like people talking to each other about stuff. I mean, sort of more just like a straight melodrama type movie is harder to translate. I do, yeah. When I'm watching a movie after all these years of going through this whole process of making GIFs out of them, I can't help but sort of catalog and sort of take note of things that I think will work well as GIFs. And also I have sort of in my mind now, I've kind of built up like just remembering things that are in certain movies. Like when I made like that compilation, I made a compilation of all the hat gags in Buster Keaton movies. Because he does a lot of, like all Sonic comics, they do a lot of jokes with their hats, because I guess it's like very relatable comedy, because everyone, I guess, in like 1920s was wearing hats. So they can like, it's like, oh, a hat joke. I can relate to that because I have a hat myself. So, but just like, so it's just remembering like, okay, in this movie, he does a thing with a hat, and this movie does a thing with a hat. It's just, I don't know what portion of my brain is just being filled up by this kind of thing. Though, I mean, I also do have to kind of go back and sort of scrub through the movies looking for specific things. But yeah. It does change the way I watch the movies, I guess.
When we actually think about what film is, right, and it's especially these sound films, which were shot on film, of course, it's this collection of photographs, this rapid, succession of images, right? These, a compilation of moments, and there's something very much in the GIF of almost returning film to its that most basic in an Eisensteinian sense, like unit of like a single frame and image. And I imagine that in doing that, you must develop this very intimate relationship with the material that you're working with, like scrubbing through frame by frame and figuring out if it's in the middle of a gag, where the person's arm should stop and go, and what makes for the best in and out point of a GIF. Is that something you think about when you're doing? Like, is it just feel for you, or do you have a specific approach for where you decide when to stop and end and freeze and do all those things?
Yeah, I guess like the interesting thing about sort of editing, because I guess in one way, like making a GIF is just sort of like, it's similar to this like editing video, like to making a compilation of shots, but you're also thinking about how the end shot is going to have to flow into the first shot. So, I mean, it's very difficult to get, like, I mean, there's only been a few I've got where it's anything close to what you would call a perfect loop, which is kind of a thing that GIF makers aspire to do, where it's like it's like almost seamlessly the GIF just sort of doesn't end. Like it's very, I got a few like that, but it's tricky to do. But you want something, you got to think about like how sometimes it's going to be inherently going to be like a jump cut, but you want, if you can get from the point where it ends to the point where it starts, if they can kind of flow together, that kind of can enhance the GIF. So it is different from just editing a shot in terms of thinking about someone watching it like in a video where it's just going forward to the next shot, because it's going to just, the GIF is inherently going to just start over again. So the next shot is the same shot as the one you're, working on. So that is, that's sort of one consideration. I guess a lot of times I do find, like with a Buster Keaton movie, like it's sort of hard to beat sometimes the way that the movie was already cut. Like it's just because, they're very economical. There's not really a lot of, especially the short films, there's not like a lot of fat or like a lot of wasted. So like if he cuts away from a gag, like it doesn't hang on for too many extra beats or anything. It's very crisp. Like, that sort of thing was lost, I think, in like his movies from the 30s. They got kind of more sort of flabbier, and they don't have that same care to just like the flow of the movie. But like, it's sort of hard to beat sometimes just the choices that were made by the original editor of the movie. Just like they've already picked the perfect in and out on a gag. So it's a lot of times I'll just go with what they have. I
think, and that's something we talk a lot about in the video essay, criticism circles that I run in, which is that the best way to kind of really understand how a film works is to deconstruct it and to really understand how it was assembled. And it sounds like when you're doing that, you developed an even more of an appreciation for, wow, the editors on these films were superb, and that's why it works.
It's crazy because they were, I'm sure, using like a razor or something. Like they were obviously not, and they just how they managed, especially like some of those crazy like Eisenstein, like the rapid cutting, the montage. I mean, just doing that with how painstaking it must have been to edit something in that way. It is kind of amazing. Obviously, they don't have the luxury. Or the thing I think about too sometimes is that the weird thing is like that there are sort of a weird phenomenon with I'm sort of interested in because I guess a lot of silent movies are lost, unfortunately. So that's something I've been sort of interested in. Like, it's like I've done it like finding fragments from lost silent movies. There's a certain like poignancy to that. Like just sort of seeing like these few seconds are all that's left of this thing that people worked on for, months, or this huge production that was like this big sets and costumes and everything. And now it's just reduced to like a 5-second clip. But like some of these movies only survive because the studios in like the 30s or the 40s, they would make these sort of self-congratulatory documentaries about themselves. And like, I guess they just task some studio employee or some editor with going through their back catalog of films and just sort of showing like, okay, here's the history of MGM. And, like this. And so some movies only survive because some editor in like 1936, he just like chose like one particular moment. And he's like, and I have to wonder, is like, was this a particularly good moment, or is it just like a random? Because some of them are kind of weird. It's like there's one of just like it's like someone just like holding what looks like an egg or like a rock, and it's like is this the best shot from this movie, or is this just something that someone just kind of chose because they had this kind of assignment of making this movie, and like I guess obviously going through a whole reels and reels of film trying to find the optimal shot versus just like picking something. But like what the choices they've made of like essentially everything they didn't pick is gone, and like all that's left of this movie is just this one shot they included in this compilation. So it's kind of, it's obviously now when I'm making a compilation of something, I mean, I have, Premiere, it's a lot easier to kind of scrub through a movie and to find things. But I just sort of think about like, people who are doing that. And it's like, I'm sure they never considered the fact that like the weight of what they were doing is like that, like, they were choosing what part of the movie is going to survive for posterity. Or the same thing, like there's some movies that only survive because of the trailer. where I mean, like the trailer is like, I'm sure when someone making a trailer isn't thinking like, okay, this is at one point going to be all that's left of this movie. It's just, I don't know. I find that kind of interesting to me.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's so fascinating. And to also just think about how, a film is super flammable and, all these roadblocks to preservation. And I think that's fascinating. And that's actually a question I have for you, which is, do you, this, as you say, the editor who was making this documentary so that a corporation could congratulate itself has, saved a piece of film history, probably unknowingly. Twitter is obviously a corporation and can never be, a true archive in a way that, a public university or library or, something like that could be. But do you think of yourself as, in a way, making sure that these images are preserved in some way? Do you think of the account in the work of you're doing as an archive in a sense? I mean, obviously you're not saving the actual film strips, but you are making sure these images, you are giving these images a new life and passing them on to new people. Do you think of yourself in that way?
Well, I mean, I don't really think of myself as saving them because I'm sure there are people, hopefully, that are actually archiving these files. But like, I sort of, like hopefully, they have like the original films or they've scanned them and they have them somewhere. But I guess sort of what I think of myself more as doing is just kind of taking these films and kind of packaging them in a way that kind of lets them sort of travel across the internet and kind of find an audience. It's like one of the most popular things I did, like I guess sort of towards the start of my account is I made a collection of, other people, I didn't make any of the animations and like other people had already made them into GIFs, but I kind of just collected together a bunch of, there's a bunch of like special effects shots from silent movies. And then there's like various documentaries where they have sort of little animations showing how the special effects were done. And I kind of put like the shot and then I put the GIF of showing how it was done. I wrote a little, a summary of it. And that was like, it became a very viral post on Reddit. It was like the #1 post. And, so it had like, I think 10 million views or something. And I guess once it sort of, you should have shown that this content can be kind of viral. Like a lot of other people have now picked that up and they're kind of, because that's how things I think spread on the internet. It's like people don't necessarily see them when they're first posted. Things sort of spread because people keep reposting them, they repurpose them. So I sort of think what I do is like, if I can kind of take this content and kind of package it in such a way that it can actually connect with people on that level, like can kind of go viral or be widely spread, then, even if my account were to go away, I mean, people were still, they still have this, like there's people who took like those GIFs and they, they took my little captions and they sort of did a text to speech thing and they made a YouTube video and that has like hundreds of thousands of views. Or like BuzzFeed made a post, which was essentially just all the, the GIFs. So they, just taking content, that's sort of what I'm interested in is just like taking this content that I like or these movies that I like and sort of thinking like, how can I sort of package them and sort of put this together in a way that will be something that has the potential to kind of spread and to kind of go viral. I mean, not that I'm not obviously always constantly chasing virality because, I mean, that would be sort of, I think that's kind of, you sort of go down that road. I mean, it's sort of can be sort of a self-destructive path. Like I know there was one account that got pretty big. Like they weren't exclusively a silent movie GIF account, but they were doing a lot of silent movie GIFs. And, it was an interesting account, but like they kind of, I guess it seems like almost like their constant need to find things that were, trying to constantly stay viral, finding things that will be viral or that will get a lot of retweets. I think eventually they kind of ran into copyright issues or something of just posting people's art. I mean, I don't know what happened, but their whole account got deleted. Or you hear about all these like Instagram accounts where they just steal people's memes, they steal people's content, they steal people's tweets. Like I've just nakedly, so I'm not interested in just like that. I'm not exclusively interested in just trying to make an account that's, obviously, if I was trying to make an account that was all focused on being popular, I wouldn't have chosen this kind of very niche thing. But it's fine. What I find interesting is just within the niche is just like the idea that I can sort of take something about it that I really like and sort of try to present it in such a way that it can sort of find a big audience. I guess I say like that Ozu thing. I mean, it got like, it wasn't like viral, but it had, like 70,000 views or something, which is, it's just, I don't know. It's, that's sort of what I find interesting, I guess, is trying to package things. Cause I guess because I am an editor, I guess in my job, it's like it's a different kind of work. But I mean, I guess it's all about thinking about how to package things together, how to sort of, present something. So that's sort of what I find, or just like my Buster Keaton hat gags. I mean, that's something that's also being kind of shared. Like I actually, it's weird. Sometimes I've seen that like where someone has like, I've seen a GIF someone has made of that, but it has like someone else's watermark on it, where someone has taken my video and then like someone has taken their video and they've made a GIF. So I guess that's sort of like, that's just how the internet works. You sort of put a piece of content out there and people see like, oh, there's a piece of content that does well. Let me just take it and put it on my Instagram account. So that's, that's just sort of that's how things spread. So even if like the original is gone, it's sort of like, it's like it's sort of out there, it's circulating. So I mean, obviously I don't think I'm saving it, but I'm sort of just, as I said, like hopefully people are seeing this stuff and they're interested in it to sort of check it out in more depth, and also just like making it in such a way that it has the potential to kind of, go to reach as wide an audience as possible. I just find sort of like an interesting kind of like an intellectual challenge, just thinking like, what's the thing I can do involving silent movies that could get 1,000 retweets? I mean, like this is not everything, it's hard to get 1,000 retweets on anything. So just kind of thinking about on the long, I have ideas, but then it's a matter of actually putting them together.
Right. And once it's out there, God knows where it's going to go. And, just like, of course, a GIF can never be a complete archive for a film, and just like those documentaries can never be a full replacement for a film, but it just like the documentary is repurposing that material into something new, your GIFs are a new medium and a new form of their own that are, as you say, hopefully spreading and giving new life to this material that will hopefully get people to go back and look at the original source.
Yeah, I mean that's always my hope. Like, I mean, I hope that people, because I think people have to be exposed to something to sort of get like an interest in it. Like, I mean, it's one thing to sort of see, like, to walk by a theater that says like Buster Keaton Film Festival, and if you have no idea who that is, I mean, maybe you're a curious person, you're just like, I'm going to check this out for no reason, but like just having a baseline understanding of like, okay, I know who Buster Keaton is. He's the guy that wall fell and he was standing there. Like you have some association like that means something to you, and then that's sort of a starting point, I would imagine. Like you can kind of go from there, and who knows how far people. I mean, obviously, I don't imagine most people seeing a Buster Keaton GIF are going to go out and like buy a bunch of Buster Keaton Blu-rays like I have, or they're going to go see like a film screening. But I mean, it's just you sort of have to have that exposure to have if like a million people see something, maybe. Or if enough people see something, even a small percentage of them are interested in it enough to kind of really get into it. I mean, that's how silent film culture will kind of stay alive, just by reaching a mass audience. Because I do think about that too sometimes, like where it's just because I imagine like how many people saw this scene like on the day the movie was released. There was a time when this was seen by like a mass audience, and then for years maybe like some of these movies were even like feared to be lost for a long time, or the scenes were like in a vault in some Russian archive or something, and then to sort of have them again just have that potential to go out there and be seen by like hundreds of thousands of people again is kind of neat. I mean, obviously they're not watching, I guess it's now because people's attention is much more fractured now. So people were maybe just watching like 10 seconds of a movie and, they're not watching the whole thing. But I mean, they're getting that exposure to it. And hopefully maybe that can lead to something else. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I probably wouldn't be here talking to you if I didn't, have discover clips of, old media on YouTube that then fueled my passion for film and, everything else. So I'm someone who certainly believes in the power of that, and just, exposure to one little thing can really set off a domino effect. I have one final question for you, and it's something you alluded to earlier, which is, I assume most of the films that you use are in the public domain. I know a lot of Buster Keaton's films are. In fact, a Buster Keaton film is in the logo for this podcast. And I think what you do, even if they're not, clearly falls under fair use. But I'm wondering, have you ever received any pushback from sharing the film clips in this way? Any copyright barriers at all?
No, I mean, I guess as you say, I think the GIF is considered fair use. Like, I mean, obviously, I think the test case would be something, because people make GIFs out of everything. They make GIFs out of like very, very valuable IP. Like people are making GIFs out of Marvel movies. They're making GIFs out of like an NFL highlights. So I think there was briefly a case where Disney, or some lawyer at Disney, was trying to push back against all the Baby Yoda GIFs, but they quickly kind of abandoned that, because I think that companies recognize that it is is valuable to their IP to have it. Because as I said, like the GIF is a very easily spreadable format. Like that's if you want to have something be part of the internet discussion, having it be out there in the GIF form is, I think, valuable to the people who own the IP. So there seems to be, I mean, I don't know if it's being tested by like, case. I don't know if there's like a Supreme Court decision where they're like deciding that GIF is fair use. Because again, as I said, like it is kind of a weird thing where GIF is essentially just it's another type of video. So it's like, would it be copyright violation to post a video of Baby Yoda but not a GIF? Like, where does you draw the line between, But I mean, I think it is generally. I haven't had any issues with that. I mean, I've had some, like I have a YouTube channel and like I made a compilation of Buster Keaton stunts that I think it's like 11 million views now, and that's, and again, it's sort of like, and again, people have used that like source material. Like I've seen people make GIFs out of that video because I can tell the sequences and stuff. So it's like, again, because people make, but yeah. So yeah, this video, I used a scene from Seven Chances where he's like diving off the cliff, and there was a copyright claim on that, but it wasn't. It was from some running magazine, I think, because they made their own video where they used the clip and they like copyrighted their video, so they inadvertently copyrighted this one clip. So I had to kind of cut it down a bit. But yeah, that's the thing. It's like it's almost like I mean, I guess some of these movies are still under copyright protection, and I guess you could argue like, is it fair use to make a compilation of Buster Keaton stunts? Is that But yeah, I mean, but no, I mean, other than that. I mean, the thing that gets claimed is music. That's the crazy thing, is like it's sort of a dichotomy. Like, so my original idea when I was making these videos is like I'll use 1920s music because like how can that possibly be a copyright problem? But like even if you're using like some recording from like 1923, it still gets content ID'd. I mean, I don't know if that's like legit. I mean, I don't know how that it's like like lifetime. I mean, I don't, to be honest, I don't know exactly what the copyright rules are for music, if it's like lifetime with the creator plus so many years. But you would think similarly with music, even like 100-year-old recording, you could post it on YouTube and you'll get there's some company that will claim your video. I mean, who knows how they came to have the rights? Maybe they themselves just like found the gramophone and just found this old like record and published a CD, and like did they pay the composer or the artist? Like how did they have the rights to it? Like maybe they just took it themselves and like they put it on CD, they put it on iTunes, and now they they say they own it, but who knows? Like so music is hard, but like film, especially for GIFs. I mean, I don't think there's any. I've never had any problem with GIFs. I think it's just part of the internet. People just accept that. I say if you make a GIF out of Baby Yoda, you can make a GIF out of Buster Keaton.
Don, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. And also thank you for all the work that you put into your Twitter account and to everything that you do. It's much appreciated. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It was enjoyable to actually talk about my Twitter account, because it's kind of thing that I feel in real life, if you just start talking about like, oh, I have a Twitter account where I make a bunch of GIFs, it's kind of, you're not going to talk about that for like an hour. Like, it's going to be like, okay, that's cool. But like, you're not going to have an hour-long conversation. I enjoyed this. Thank you.